Welcome back to Motors in Medicine. On today's episode, I'm going to be discussing the key differences between food poisoning and a stomach bug. Now, most people have experienced one or the other or both at some point in their lives, and they're both miserable to deal with. But what I wanted to do first was just kind of talk about kind of a background on our bodies and how they react to these microbes. The reality is that the human body has, at any given point in or time, trillions of bacteria, microbes, many viruses that live on our bodies, on our skin, or inside our bodies every single day of existence. And the reason for that is there's a symbiotic relationship between these microbes and the human body. We live and we coexist with these microbes, and they, in a way, keep us healthy. A lot of the microbes on our skin prevent our skin from getting infections from other things that we're exposed to out in the world. Same thing with the microbes inside our bodies and in our guts. Now, what ends up happening is we get an exposure to some type of microbe that our body is not used to. That creates a major imbalance of the microbiome in our body, and then we end up getting sick. So, to start, I'm going to cover what food poisoning is and how it's very similar but not the same as a stomach bug. And then we'll talk about the common transmissions or rather cases that people experience on a year-to-year basis, the method of transmission, how it's best prevented, how it's treated, and the symptoms, of course, that you experience. So, we'll start with food poisoning. Now, food poisoning in general is caused by consuming contaminated or undercooked food that was exposed to some type of microbe because the kitchen wasn't kept clean, if you went and did it in a restaurant, that type of thing. And you can also get food poisoning from somebody preparing food that didn't wash their hands prior to the preparation of the food. Now, I know any of you out there who happen to be Seinfeld fans will remember the episode where Jerry goes to the restaurant and Poppy is working on the pizza dough. He leaves, goes to the bathroom. Jerry's in the bathroom, and he happens to see that Poppy goes to the bathroom and exits the bathroom without washing his hands. And then he proceeds to go back out, handle the dough. And so it's just that type of mechanism. That is exactly how most foodborne illnesses are transmitted. So it's a fecal-oral transmission, if you will. And what that basically means is that somebody went to the bathroom, didn't wash their hands, handled food, prepared food, and then you consume that food. Now, food poisoning in general tends to be a little bit quicker onset than a stomach bug, okay? Now, food poisoning, in general, most people are going to experience symptoms between 4 to 6 hours after consuming that contaminated food. And when those symptoms come on, they're very rapid, they're very quick, and typically, most people will experience stomach pain, cramps, nausea, followed by pretty violent vomiting, and then eventually diarrhea. The reason that the body is reacting that way is because you have introduced a microbe into the body that it is not used to, or in a quantity that it is not used to, and that throws off your microbiome, and your body just wants to get rid of it. And the body's only method to get rid of these microbes is to violently expel them through vomiting, or if they happen to make their way further down the alimentary canal, then through diarrhea. That's the reason we get diarrhea or vomiting, to get rid of these microbes. So typically, you're going to feel a lot of fatigue. You're going to feel dehydrated. And when it comes to food poisoning, it's very short-lived, and it's in and out of your body fairly quickly. It's generally something that happens and clears up within 1 to 2 days after you experience the symptoms. So again, food poisoning, it's brought on by consuming contaminated food, and those contaminating microbes can be anything from Salmonella, E. coli, even norovirus, to be honest with you. So any of those things can cause food to be contaminated, and people are just preparing the food, not washing their hands. It's a fecal oral transmission. Again, food poisoning comes on roughly 4 to 6 hours after you've consumed the food, and then it's pretty quick after that you start experiencing the symptoms. Pretty bad stomach pain and cramps, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, etc. Now, on the flip side, let's talk about a stomach bug. Now, a stomach bug, in general, you're going to be affected by microbes that are also transmitted through a fecal oral method. So the difference is that with stomach bugs, those stomach bugs tend to be transmitted because, again, people did not wash their hands and then touched surfaces, or perhaps maybe shared food or shared a drink or that kind of thing. So stomach bugs tend to spread when there's like more confined spaces. So an example would be in a household, or another big example would be like on a cruise ship. And the most common offending agent, say on a cruise ship, is norovirus. A norovirus is just a virus that affects the alimentary canal primarily, and it's fecal oral transmission, and it's spread through surfaces and touch. And so people just don't wash their hands, and you touch a bunch of surfaces, and then somebody else touches that surface, and then you end up inadvertently touching something that you eat and then putting it in your mouth, and that's how it gets into your system. Now, stomach bugs, in general, most of the offending agents are in fact norovirus. However, there are cases where it can be any number of other microbes, including rotavirus, which tends to affect children a lot more than it does adults. But any number of microbes can also cause stomach bug. Now, a stomach bug is going to be a little bit different in its presentation. The symptoms are basically the same, but the onset of symptoms is a little bit different. With food poisoning, as I mentioned, your symptoms come on 4 to 6 hours after you consume that food. With a stomach bug, it's going to be 1 to 2 days before you start to experience those symptoms. But when you do, it's going to be about the same type of symptom presentation. You'll start with having that strange feeling in your stomach, and then that progresses to stomach cramping, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, the whole thing. It doesn't tend to be quite as quick in and out of your body as the food poisoning is. And so with a stomach bug, you might be sick for 3 to 4 days instead of 1 to 2. But again, it's going to cause very similar symptoms, and you're going to have the same type of reactions in your body. Now, there are a couple things that happen when you first start with the symptoms of either food poisoning or a stomach bug, either one. You start with having that stomach pain. Now, when you start to experience the vomiting, the problem with that is you're going to end up expelling a lot of acid, which is going to cause your acid-base balance in your body to become more basic because you've just expelled a lot of your acid out. And so that tends to be more of a miserable feeling when you lose a lot of acid, and now you have a lot of, now you've become basic. If we're talking about acids and bases, you become more basic in your body, and that makes you feel a whole lot worse. And then that's what you need to try to focus on, getting something very, like a very, very weak acid reintroduced into your body, which is why something like ginger ale or Sprite or soda, anything like that, but like sipping it kind of helps get that back in. You have to eat foods that are super light, because anything heavy, your body's just not going to be able to handle that. Because once you've expelled out all that acid, now you can't digest food very well. So now you have a hard time consuming anything. You've got to get your body back to balance. And so it's a very slow process. Eating simple foods that are not heavy and keeping your fluid levels up, and then trying to sip things like Sprite or ginger ale, that will help kind of get those acid levels start to creep back to normal. Now, on the flip side, once it's passed down into your alimentary canal and it starts to affect your intestines further down, now you start to experience diarrhea. So diarrhea is going to cause just the opposite. Diarrhea is going to cause you to lose a whole bunch of base, and then you're going to become too acidic in that event. Now, that's still going to make you feel miserable. Not as bad as feeling basic, but when you're feeling acidic, you also feel kind of off. So again, your body doesn't like to be out of balance when we're talking acids and base. It needs to be in balance as quickly as possible. So there again, using some type of anti-diarrheal agent will help slow that down. Now remember, diarrhea is a good thing for a day or two because it's trying to expel that microbe out of your body and get back on track. But too much diarrhea and you get really dehydrated, not to mention you become very acidic. So when you become too dehydrated, now you start to run the risk of having other side effects, other problems, kidney issues, cramping. You don't want that. So you need to start replenishing fluids, especially electrolytes. And so once you've had diarrhea, drinking something like a half and half mixture of Gatorade and water, or like a Pedialyte, is ideal for getting that electrolyte balance back into normal range. Now, let's talk a little bit about what the propensity is of these two conditions. So in general, food poisoning tends to affect 1 in 7 people, about 50 million people a year. And when you consider the population is about 360 million people in the US, it's roughly 1 in 7 people are affected by food poisoning. So that's pretty common and pretty frequent. And so that just begs the question, why is there not more vigilance as far as people washing their hands when they prepare food? And then of course, people just being cautious about where they eat and what they eat. Secondarily, the common transmission rates for stomach bugs, it's a little bit less. So you're talking about 30 million people a year. So maybe 1 in 15, 1 in 20 people end up getting a stomach bug every year. And that's a lot of the population as well. And there again, it just comes down to just not maintaining good hygiene, washing hands. And then of course you go on and touch surfaces. Other people touch those same surfaces. And this is why it's just one of those things. You need to try to keep in mind, if you're going to be vigilant about not getting these infections, always keep your hands as clean as possible, because your hands and what they touch, things like your phone is probably one of the dirtiest things that you carry, because your hands are touching it all the time and your hands are touching things all the time. So keeping your hands clean and washed on a frequent basis, having a sanitizer with you at all times, that's probably the best way to prevent the transmission, because again, it's fecal oral most of the time. So, you have to be vigilant about keeping yourself aware of the situations and the potential for these infections. The other thing that can help mitigate some of this symptoms and the side effects you get from these two conditions would be to maintain a good diet, good hydration, of course, taking a daily probiotic supplement. That can help keep that balance of bacteria and the microbiome of your body a little bit happy and a little bit more prepared for when something does get introduced into the body. But ultimately, it just comes down to good hygiene, keeping your hands washed and cleaned, and people who work in the food industry just always washing your hands multiple times to prevent any transmission into the food that's being prepared. So that kind of gives you a good distinct difference between and an understanding between food poisoning and the stomach bug. Now, how do you treat these two conditions? Well, the most common method is, again, I've already discussed many, good hydration. If it's the food poisoning, or rather if it's just in general, you can treat them both the same way. But if it's just a lot of vomiting first, then you want to try to just eat very light things like toast, very simple sugars, things like sip, something like ginger ale or Sprite, something like that to reintroduce a little bit of the acid back into your stomach to help settle things down. Once you hit the diarrhea phase, then now it's more important to get the hydration up, electrolyte balance back in order. So the half and half Gatorade water or the Pedialyte, excuse me. And then of course, it comes down to just rest. Rest is the big thing here. Let your body recuperate from these conditions. 1 to 2 days for food poisoning, 3 to 4 days for stomach bug, and then you'll kind of just be back out doing your normal things again. So the treatments, you kind of just ride it out, you know, and there are a few things, you know, you can use an anti-diarrheal agent. You just don't want to stop yourself completely from having diarrhea, because remember, your body's just trying to get rid of that microbe. And you can also use an anti-vomiting agent. One example is Zofran. It's a prescription medication that helps mitigate some of that vomiting. But again, even with that, your vomiting has a purpose. Your body's just trying to expel as much of that concentrated microbe as possible so that you're not hurting your body. You just don't want to be vomiting too much or having too much diarrhea. It's a fine balance there. So once you've experienced all that rest and gone through and worked through this process, your body just bounces back, goes back to that same phase that it was before. And then you just have horrible memories of all the vomiting and the diarrhea and the things that you just don't want to experience again. So just keep in mind, as long as you're being hyper vigilant and always washing your hands, keeping yourself as fit, good diet, good exercise, good hydration, you'll minimize your risk, but there's never any way to eliminate the risk. So you just know that, you know, these things are going to happen, and they are very common and highly contagious. So we just need to try to be as responsible as we can and maintain that hygiene and maintain that washing of the hands. So hopefully you guys understand food poisoning and stomach bug a little bit better, and the differences between the two and the similarities, of course. And I appreciate all of your support. Channel's growing, doing well. I'm going to continue trying to provide content. You know, I haven't had a chance to do anything in a while because I've just been busy with work and other things. So on the next video, I'm going to try to get back into doing something on the Bronco. It's kind of tough time of year because it's still winter time and it's just hard to get out and get motivated because it's cold. But anyway, I'm going to try to get back into doing something with that. And then we'll continue to get some videos going and try to provide as much content as possible. So until next time, this is Motors and Medicine signing off. Have a great day. Thanks.